Welcome to another video here from Chapter 11, again independence test, and this is an example of an independence test. Problem is wanting to know, is there a relationship? Can you conclude a relationship between the class of vertebrae and whether it is endangered or threatened? So the relationship or the question is going to deal with, is there a relationship, not an independence in the actual statement. When we're dealing with these, the first thing we need to check is whether it's okay to use, and that deals with calculating the expected values. And in order to calculate those, you need the row sums and the column sums. This row sum is 247. This row sum, 122. This column, 81. This one, 91. This one, 37. And then 23. And the last one, 137. And then the grand total here, 369. So those are the values that you have to use in order to find your expected values. And your expected values are the row sums times the column sum over the total. So for our area in the 68 there, that would be listed as expected value 1, 1, indicating first row, first column. And that would be first row 247, that sum, times the first column sum, 81, over our total, which is 369. 247 times 81 over 369, which is 54.22. As we look at E12, which stands for first row, second column, that's 247 times 91 over 369. Which is 60.91. And at this point, I want you to pause the video, calculate the rest of them, and check them against what shows up here as I put those on the screen. As you calculated those, you should have gotten a 54.22, a 60.91, a 24.77, 15.4, 91.7, 26.78, 30.09, 12.23, 7.6, and 45.3. One thing you should notice is that every column will add up to the value below, and every row will add up along the side. Those expected values will add up just as well. It is important to note that every expected value is greater than or equal to 5. This is required. That's why we started with that rather than starting with the hypothesis. We need to know that each one of those is greater than 5 so that we can go ahead and continue with the testing. So with those met, that requirement met, let's go start with the test itself with the hypothesis statement, the null hypothesis, there is no relationship between class of vertebrae and whether it's endangered or just threatened. Whether it's endangered or threatened. The alternate is that there is a relationship. Between class and endangered or threatened. So the question was noted in the terms of relationship, so we need to use that with our hypothesis statements as well. Our significance level, alpha equals 0.05 again. Our critical value then with degrees of freedom, which is remember, r minus 1 times c minus 1, which would be, there were 2 rows, and there were 5 columns. So 1 times 4, 4 degrees of freedom. That gives us a chi-square score of, going back to that, 0.05, 4 degrees of freedom, 9498, 9488. 9.488. So we've got our hypothesis statements, our critical value. Now it's a matter of calculating our test statistic. And again, that's a chi-square score. It's equal to that large summation of the observed minus the expected, quantity squared over the expected. And for our particular example, that's a very large number of sums. 68 minus 54.22 over 54.22 plus 76 minus 60.01 squared over 60.01 plus, I'm just going with a dot, 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 and that's fine for you as well. And then the last one there, just to indicate that it does end, 61 minus 45.3 squared over 45.3. If you want to pause that and calculate that, make sure that you're calculating them in the right manner. Go ahead. That is 45 .314. And these can be off a little bit based on rounding. But looking back at our test statistic, or our critical value, 9.48 as opposed to a 45.314, we reject H sub 0, the null hypothesis. Remember, it's always the null hypothesis that we reject or do not reject there. It's the summary where we decide the other part about the claim. And rejecting the null hypothesis there means pretty much we're agreeing with this statement. In other words, we're saying there probably is a relationship between the classes. So for our summary, there is sufficient evidence to indicate a relationship. Between class of vertebrae and whether it's endangered or threatened. And just going back with a little recap, hypothesis, there is no relationship for the null. There is a relationship for the alternative. Remember, your degrees of freedom are based on row minus 1 times column minus 1. Your test statistic is that chi-square, sum of the observed minus expected squared over the expected. And it's always a square, so it's always positive. And then you reject if it's greater than. And then we had our summary. And our summary needs to be based in terms of what our null hypothesis was. They ask if there was a relationship. That's what we need to state. If there is or if there is not. In this case, yes, there was.